Hello, everyone. It's good to talk to you again. As we are all experiencing this period of lockdown, I thought it would be good to look at some of the people from the Bible who experience periods of isolation. So, we're going to start with Elijah. So, who was Elijah? Elijah was a prophet of God during the time of the kingdom of Israel. A prophet in the Old Testament, like Elijah, was someone who spoke on God's behalf to the people. And a bit of background maybe to the story we're going to look at. Elijah had a very difficult challenge as the voice of God to the people of Israel because they had largely turned their back on God and had started to worship a false god called Baal. This worship was led by the king, Ahab, and his wife Jezebel. Elijah had made a strong stand against the worship of Baal, and God had demonstrated his power over them through a miraculous sign. This angered Jezebel, and she blamed Elijah. So we're going to pick up from 1 Kings 19 what happens next in the story. So let's read that. So now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he had killed the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like that of one of them." Elijah was afraid and ran for his life. When he came to Beersheba in Judah, he left a servant there, while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness. He came to a broom bush, sat under it, and prayed that he might die. "I've had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life, I am no better than my ancestors." Then he lay down under the bush and fell asleep. All at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around, and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals, and a jar of water. He ate and drank, and then lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time, touched him, and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." So he got up, ate, and drank. Strengthened by that food, he travelled for 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. So Elijah receives two messengers in this passage, one from Jezebel and one from God. That's the angel. The first message he receives is very negative. In fact, it tells him that he's going to be killed and that Jezebel is going to devote everything in her power to getting rid of him. Elijah forgets God's power and authority over everything, even if he has just seen God defeat all of Baal's prophets, and he becomes afraid of Jezebel. He lets the situation overwhelm him, and so he runs away as far as he can, the whole length of the country in fact. He is filled with despair and becomes suicidal. He has lost all hope in his isolation, which is both physical, he's in the wilderness, and mental. He has given up on himself and everyone else. Thankfully, that's not the only message Elijah receives, because God sends an angel to him. The angel is a messenger from God, and he brings Elijah what he needs. When Elijah has had enough of life, the angel brings him food and water, which sustain him to live, the opposite of Elijah's desire for death. Also, God has a journey for Elijah to undertake, and the angel gives Elijah more food, enough for the journey. God meets Elijah's needs, irrespective of his problems, and God never gives up or runs away from Elijah, even when Elijah gives up and runs away from God. It's easy for us to listen to the world around us and to what it says about us. We are often told, directly or indirectly, that our value, identity, and source of hope is tied up with what we do, what we look like, or who we are. We might feel rubbish when we don't do well enough in our exams, if a friendship or relationship breaks down, or even when our family members are just doing our head in. When we face problems, it's easy to ignore God's voice in the situation. Elijah faced a real problem. It wasn't something he overreacted to or that he had imagined, but the reason for his despair is that he ignored God in that situation, and he let the situation decide his value, identity, and source of hope. In the same way that God met Elijah's needs, God meets our needs in whatever situation we find ourselves. He gives us what we need when we've had enough and can't seem to go on, and he gives us enough of what we need to fulfill whatever he has called us to do. God is in control of everything, and there is no problem too big or too small for him. We each face many challenges through this period of isolation, and they aren't all the same. But God is in control, and we need to trust in him for all our problems. If you'd like us to pray for anything specific, then don't hesitate to send us a quick private message to the High Street Youth Facebook page. But finally, I have a few questions for you to help you apply the talk to your own life. or this passage to your own life, and I've included them on the Facebook post. I've linked it in as well with Philippians chapter 4 verses 6 to 7, which says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." So first question I have for you is, what is causing you anxiety at the moment? Do you ever feel like Elijah felt? What does verse 6 say you should do? Verse 6 says that when we ask God for something, we should do so with thanksgiving. What do you have to be thankful for this week? And what does verse 7 say will happen if we do give our problems to God? How is it similar to what happened to Elijah in this passage? Finally, what messages are you listening to? Are they distracting you from what God says? And what can you do this week so that you can hear from God? Thank you very much, and I'll hopefully see you next week.